And then he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to fail. That was a 3-month campaign, and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people. No wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so...
No. You saying 3 months wasn't long enough?
It was too long. It was long enough.
It was long enough.
If they had a primary...
It's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone and they didn't like them.
If they had had a primary, they wouldn't have picked her. And if they had...
That's different.
Another round of self-proclaimed intellectuals appeared on Asterisk real-time with Bill Maher Asterisk, acting like they were about to school the world. Spoiler, they didn't bring facts, only feelings. Ma, however, delivered a brutal dose of reality, leaving them speechless in record time. The audience cheered while the woke warriors sat there, blinking like deer in headlights. It's no secret that elections stir emotions, but the left still hasn't recovered from the sting of losing. Now they're throwing everything at Trump's presidency. First, the media, then big tech, corporate institutions, and even comedy sketches have joined in. But Bill Maher wasn't having it. When SNL took a jab at Trump, Ma fired back with a sharp response, shutting down the critics. His brutal one-liner left the audience roaring while his guests were left scrambling. Ma made it clear, feelings don't trump facts, no matter how many institutions are in play.
Kamala was on Saturday Night Live, as the losing candidate often is. It worked so well for Hillary. Let's run that back. And it just made me think, I'm sure every single member of the Saturday Night Live cast was a Harris supporter. But what if one of them wasn't? What if one of those cast members was for Trump? Would they have felt comfortable saying so? I really don't think so. They would have had to keep it to themselves. That's not a good place for us to be. I remember when... And that happens even more on the left.
The woke mob is still reeling from their candidate's loss in the presidential election, but what's worse is their constant trashing of Trump's presidency. From late-night comedy skits to social media rants, it's as if Orange Man Bad has become their full-time job. When facts don't support their outrage, they just turn up the volume, hoping no one notices the lack of substance. It's not merely criticism, it's an obsession disguised as activism. But here's the real question. If Trump is such a loser, why can't they stop talking about him? It's baffling, isn't it? And another issue Ma finds even more puzzling is the Democrats' claim that they lost the election because they couldn't get their message out in time. Maybe it's time to stop blaming everyone else.
You have to be authentic. You can't reverse engineer any of this off a blueprint. And I really think this is true about politics. Steve Jobs once said, it's not the customer's job to know what they want. It's our job. And you couldn't have reverse engineered Barack Obama off of George W. Bush. And you couldn't have reverse engineered Donald Trump off of Barack Obama. What happens in the end of an election is everyone sifts through the data and they come up with their perfect, their plan based on, well, this worked and with this group and we got attack here and there. And what politics about is a certain point is like innovation and communication. You got to come up with new stories and new ways of telling.
This Ken Martin guy, he said something I've heard Democrats say a lot. We didn't get our message out. Maybe I'm paraphrasing. But
Yeah.
And I've said this before to Democrats. No, you did. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You did get your message out, and people don't like the message.
Took a page straight out of Kamala Harris' playbook, string a bunch of words together, add some dramatic pauses, and voila, you've said absolutely nothing. Impressive, right? Of course, it's not the job of politicians, especially the Democrats, to tell us who to vote for. That would be undemocratic. But Bill Maher had enough of the word salad and shut Chris down cold. Ma didn't sugarcoat it. He said the voters heard Harris's message, understood it perfectly and surprised, rejected it. Why? Because platitudes don't win elections, and if their message is so powerful, why do they need to shout over everyone else? Just when you think it's over, Chris drops a shocker.
I think that I don't think there's anyone who hasn't had a moment across the political spectrum of some form of progressive communication that's either left them bewildered or a little I don't know about that. But I also think at the same time, there is a message of what I would call common sense, patriotic pluralism.
Yeah.
That is a majority message, which is if some father and mother have healthcare for their kid lined up who's trans, just stay the fuck out of their business. And let them make that decision. That's their decision to make. And you don't have to make that for your family. I'm not going to tell you what to do with
Well,
your
I
family.
mean, but the argument is whether the child should make the decision.
But the child is never making the decision. The parents are always making the decision. Parents consent to medical care.
Well, here in California, you're allowed to hide it from the parents if the kid is.
Yes,
Thank
but-
you, one person who knows that.
But I mean,
Somebody knows that is the case.
Once again, Chris is doing what the woke crowd does best, muddying the waters and moving the goalposts like it's an Olympic sport. But here's the inconvenient truth. It's on record that most states in the U.S. allow minors to make life-altering decisions about transitioning without parental consent. Bill Maher didn't mince words. He laid it out plainly. Kids are being encouraged to hide this from their parents, while school authorities play counselor, doctor, and judge. Think about that. Parents can't sign off on a school trip without a permission slip, but a life-changing medical decision can be kept a secret. So who's really protecting the kids here? It sure doesn't seem like it's the parents. Still on the subject of kids, Bill Maher didn't hold back when he torched renowned scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson. Why? Tyson backed college students who disrupted speeches they disagreed with. Maher made it clear there's no place for shutting down free speech just because you don't like what's being said. It's a dangerous trend that deserves scrutiny.
There's a portfolio
I
of jokes
would-
that would still
if-
work on a college campus. Surely.
I would hope not. From what maybe some college campuses, the ones you read about are fucking insane.
You've given up
And
on an
the
entire generation,
I
and
have
you don't know how to
I
make
have
them
given
last.
up on any place that doesn't even remotely attempt to believe in free speech and thinks that anything that they hear that they don't like, that they don't agree with, is violence. These people are fucking nuts, and you should be calling them out. Somebody like you, who has standing with kids, should be not
I do
joining
when-
them.
when there's
You
a
are
science
you're doing what
objectivity to it,
you're
yes.
doing what parents do. You're
What's that?
taking the path of least resistance, and therefore hurting the kids and yourself. Parents ruin both their lives. They ruin their fucking spoiled kids' lives, and they ruin their own lives because the kids rule the roost. So that's what you're doing on a national.
Looks like Neil deGrasse Tyson has officially gone woke shocking right. I mean, what else do you expect from a guy who unironically claims there are infinite genders at this rate, will need a calculator just to keep up, and of course he's all in on the idea that biological men should totally be allowed to compete in women's sports because fairness is so last century. Well, Ma wasn't buying the nonsense on real time. He called out Tyson's BS. Without breaking a sweat, no sugarcoating, no polite disagreement, just pure unfiltered common sense. Because here's the thing, when the party of science starts treating biology like it's subjective, someone's got to pump the brakes. And Maher, he practically slammed the emergency stop. So the real question is, if reality itself is now problematic, where does it end when gravity gets canceled for being oppressive?
America, the magazine. I remember when it was around when
I
I was
grew
a
up with
kid.
it, yeah.
Grew up with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, their editor had to quit.
Yeah, I heard about it because she expressed some opinions, right.
Sure, but it sure didn't sound scientific. It didn't sound like the person I would want to be running Scientific American.
Okay.
It was a rant on Twitter. Inequity between male and female athletes is a result not of inherent biological differences between the sexes, but of biases in how they are treated in sports. That's nuts. And it sure ain't scientific, and it's in Scientific American. What I'm asking is, Scientific American is saying, basically, that the reason why an WNBA team can't beat the Lakers is because of societal.
Does she still have her job?
No, not because of this. I said the scandal is not her tweet. The scandal,
Because that was like a year ago, was it? Which one was a year ago?
I think a year ago, women still couldn't beat men
Yeah.
in basketball or any other sport. And it wasn't because of society.
This one's my favorite, when Bill Maher, a comedian, ended up sounding more like a scientist than Neil deGrasse Tyson. Seriously, how woke do you have to be to suggest women can outcompete men in sports? We're talking biology here, not feelings. And right on cue, Tyson started tap dancing around reality when Maher hit him with a simple question. Asterisk, could the WNBA All-Star team beat the Lakers asterisk crickets? Absolute crickets. Because even Tyson, with all his astrophysics credentials, couldn't bring himself to admit the obvious. Why? Because facts don't fit the woke narrative. It was almost poetic watching a self-proclaimed man of science fumble over basic, observable reality. But Maher didn't let up. He pressed, and Tyson squirmed, while the audience watched the so-called expert struggle to navigate his own logic trap. If truth is now offensive, what's next? Denying gravity because it pulls too hard. If Bill Maher can do this to woke scientists, just imagine what he can do to woke politicians. And here's where he really went for the jugular, Gavin Newsom asterisk.
It's like there's a new law in this. I think we have way too many regulations and laws, as we've talked about. And this one, I think, says if you're a department store with over 500 employees, you have to have a gender-neutral toy department.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, I get it.
So do you think that's
No, but it's
silly? Do you think that's a silly thing that
What was
we
interesting-
too much government there?
That's an interesting one because the department stores came to us supporting that. And they're the ones making a case for that. They were making a case, they're already moving in that direction.
Wanted you to make a law about them?
Well, but they've supported the legislation. It wasn't legislation that was enacted, that was initiated from my office, but it was legislation that came up with interesting support from the industry itself. But I understand how that's exploited, and good people can disagree.
If Chris and Kamala are the reigning champs of word salad, meet the undisputed king of evasive answers, Gavin Newsom. The man usually speaks like he's auditioning for a TED talk, sharp, polished, and dripping with self-assurance. But not this time. Bill Maher flipped the script and beat Newsom at his own game. The question? Does he think the law requiring stores with 500-plus employees to have a gender-neutral toy section is silly? That's it. A simple yes or no would have sufficed. But Newsom? He tap-danced around it like his political career depended on it, talking in circles, rambling about the bill's origins, and desperately avoiding the obvious. Here's the thing, when you're peddling woke nonsense, you can't afford to give straight answers. A simple yes would upset the activists, and a no would expose just how ridiculous the whole thing sounds. Maher, however, sat back and watched as Newsom squirmed under the weight of his own spin. Nothing's funnier than watching a politician drown in the word soup they cooked up themselves. Instead of directly addressing the issue, Newsom got caught in his own web of evasions, and Maher savored every second of it.
Still don't have enough water in the Colorado River and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then whenever I read, 80% of the water goes to agriculture. Almonds.
Right.
No one ever asked you about almonds? Oh, I'm going to ask you about almonds. We grow a boatload of
I'm
almonds
well
here.
aware.
You know what? You know how much water it takes?
Many gallons.
1,900 gallons to grow a pound of almonds. Come on, man. Take on big almonds.
Take on big on.
I mean, it's not like we don't have the water.
Well, you're right about it. It's not that we don't have the water. That said, the last couple of years were tough. I mean, but it's also where the water's falling and we're not capturing it. And we're not capturing those extreme years with these atmospheric rivers. Wets are getting a lot wetter, dry's drier, hot's getting a lot hotter. And so we've got to modernize our conveyance system. We've got to modernize our storage, not just above ground, but below ground.
Frankly speaking, Gavin Newsom could win gold in an Olympic talking competition. The man can yap for days without ever landing on a point. Bill Maher wasn't asking for a monologue, just a simple answer. The question was crystal clear. Why is over 80% of California's water used to grow almonds when almonds only make up 2% of the state's economy? Instead of addressing the elephant, or should we say the almond, in the room, Newsom launched into a TED talk about storage facilities, climate change, and of course, global warming. Classic political theater. Throw out buzzwords and hope no one notices you never actually answered the question. Maher sat there, half amused, half exasperated, watching Newsom twist himself into knots. When the facts don't align with the narrative, all that's left is smoke, mirrors, and empty rhetoric. Funny, isn't it? For all this talk about sustainability, Newsom couldn't sustain a coherent answer.
And he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to fail. That was a 3-month campaign, and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people. No wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so...
No.
No.
You saying 3 months wasn't long enough?
I mean...
It was too long. It was long enough. It was long enough.
If they had a primary...
It's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone they didn't like them.
If they had a primary, they wouldn't have picked her. And if they had,
That's
she would have been
different.
able to
Yes.
rough out those edges that then she basically has to start from scratch with a campaign team she didn't hire that didn't like her.
And this guest right here actually had the nerve to claim Kamala Harris lost because she only had 3 months to campaign. 3 months. Please, If Biden had done even halfway decent over the last 4 years, would Harris have even needed to campaign? The presidency should have been a slam dunk, but instead it was an airball. But here's where it gets downright laughable. She didn't just blame the timeline. No, the real kicker was when she claimed Biden's own campaign team didn't like Harris. Think about that. Even her own side wasn't buying what she was selling. Maybe, just maybe, it's not about timing, sabotage, or sexism. Maybe Americans just didn't want another 4 years of empty platitudes and word salads. If Harris couldn't win over her own team, how was she ever supposed to win over the country? Interestingly, we weren't the only ones tired of the woke mob's shenanigans. Bill Maher was too, and he called them out for it.
The candidates, especially the Democrats, do to get voters annoys them. The constant texting. Did you get the texts like from Tim Walz every 5 minutes and like always begging for money and knocking on doors? And we've got people knocking on doors. People don't want knocking on your door. Who in this day and age wants someone knocking on? Kids don't even like it when if you a phone call. That's like too much of a invasion of their privacy, which they don't care about.
Exactly, Bill. The Democrats were way too intrusive. They knew Biden had tanked in the polls, Harris wasn't pulling her weight, and panic mode had officially kicked in. So what did they do? Cook up a last-minute strategy to save a sinking ship. Fair enough. Desperate times, desperate measures, right? But here's the problem. They didn't just campaign. They harassed, endless texts, non-stop phone calls, knocking on doors like debt collectors, and begging for donations like a broke college kid at the end of the semester. And guess what? It backfired spectacularly. When your campaign feels less like outreach and more like a hostage negotiation, people check out fast. The irony is almost poetic. The party that screams about consent had no problem blowing up everyone's phones and invading their privacy. Nothing says vote for us like making voters dread every notification. In the end, it wasn't just intrusive, it was pathetic. And voters responded the only way they could, by slamming the door shut. And that, folks, is how we slammed the door shut on today's episode. If you enjoyed our commentary, hit the like button and subscribe for more woke takedowns like this. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.